What's going on, everyone? My name is Kodomore and welcome back to the New Beginner Java Game Programming Tutorial Series, episode 23. In this episode, we are going to fix a little tiny problem that we have with our collision detection. If we look right now, our collision detection is working perfectly. But if I try to move down into a tile like this, for instance, you'll see that there are a couple of pixels in between the bounding box of our player and the actual solid wall tile I'm trying to move down into. Our game will not let us go right up against a tile in some cases. For instance, going left works perfectly, but going to the right or down, there's a few pixels of space in between the bounding box and the tile that we're trying to move into. Our game won't let us move right up next to a tile. And that is because when we move our player to the right, for instance, in my case, our player is right here and we're trying to move a few pixels into this tile. And our game is saying, no way, you can't do that, there's a collision, so it's just not moving us and we're staying right here. But we want to make it so that we can move right up against a tile. Because if your game requires precise movements by the player, then your player is going to get pretty mad if there's random collision happening outside of the collision box. Now, I've been thinking about how we can fix this problem, and there are multiple ways. But I decided to finally teach you guys one of the simplest ways that we can check this and fix it with the way we have our code set up. The way that we're going to be doing is not the best way, I would say, but it works completely fine for what we are doing. So in the moveX method right here, when we're moving right, we have this if statement that checks the two corners to see if we're moving into a tile. And if there isn't a collision with either of the corners, then we will move the player. However, if there is a collision with a tile moving to the right, we're going to put this else statement, and that means there was a collision. We are now inside of a tile. So what we want to do here is we want to completely reset the X position of the player. And we want to make sure that we just set the X position of the player so that the player's bounding box is aligned directly up with that tile we tried to move into. That way, no matter what, we will be standing right next to the tile if there was a collision. So we'll move as far as possible to the tile, but not into it. You'll understand once we begin doing this. So to start off, what we're going to do is we are going to set the X position of the creature to our temporary X variable multiplied by tile.tileWidth, and we have to do that to convert it into pixel coordinates. Now if we run our game, and don't worry, I did change a few of the variables in my player class to position the bounding box a bit better over the player. Anyways, now if we run our game and we try to move right into a tile, our player is actually going to snap right inside of the tile. Because what we did is we set the X position of the player, which is, the edge of the player image, because my player image has a bit of white space in between the arm and the edge of the image. So it set the X coordinate of the player's image equal to, or the same as the tile that we were trying to move into. So now our X coordinate is in line with the tile that we tried to move into right here. Now of course, because we were moving right, we have to align the edge of the bounding box with the tile instead of the edge of our image, because this looks really wrong. And it's actually really simple to do that. All we have to do is we have to subtract the X coordinate of our boundary and also subtract the width of our boundary as well. Now if you run the game and you go right into a tile, you'll see that it works perfectly. We are able to stand right up against the tile. Now this creates a problem because if you're standing right next to a tile, we are no longer able to move up and down. That isn't any big problem, that's just because of how I taught you guys how to do vertical collision detection. So instead of changing all of that code, all we're going to do is add a -1 here at the end. Now this will create a 1 pixel gap, but it will allow us to slide, and you can compensate for that by making a tiny bit of a smaller bounding box like I did. So it still works perfectly, that's just because of the way we did vertical collision detection. Anyways, now collision detection is working much more perfect when we are moving right. We are able to stand right next to a tile. Alright, now let's do that for going left, which is a bit different. So we're going to add an else statement, and we are going to set X equal to, again, our temporary X multiplied by our tile.tileWidth to convert it to pixel coordinates. So this, when we move left into a tile, it'll plop us inside of the tile. But in order to get out of the tile now, what we have to do is we're going to add the width of a tile, so we're going to be right next to the tile out here. Then we just have to subtract the X portion of our bounding box, and that'll align it. So plus tile.tileWidth, and then minus our bounds.x variable. This will align it perfectly, so if we run the game now, we are now aligned up with the left block. So now collision detection is perfect, and sliding works perfectly going this way. Alright, perfect. That's all. Now we have to work on vertical collision detection, which is actually very similar. So going down to the move Y method here, and we're going to add an else statement for going up. And up is going to be very similar to how we did left. subtract, we're going to set y equal to our temporary y variable multiplied by tile.tile_height to get it into pixel coordinates. And then we just have to add tile.tile_height again to get us beside it and subtract bounds.y. And this should all work whenever we move up. Now we can move up with absolutely no problem at all. And then going down is just like going to the right. So we're going to set y equal to our temporary y multiplied by tile.tile_height, get it into pixels, and we have to subtract bounds.y and subtract bounds.height, and then also subtract 1 because that will fix our sliding problem. Now moving down into a tile, look at that, it works perfectly. Like I said, for the width and height of your bounding box, you might have to subtract 1 from what you usually would do because of how we had to fix our sliding problem, but other than that, collision detection is much more perfect. We are able to get right up next to all of the tiles in our game. And it wasn't that hard either, it was a bit of math. Hopefully you guys all understood it. Now what we can do is we can go into the player class and we can comment out all of this stuff that draws a rectangle, and now we have our player, which is colliding with tiles perfectly. It looks great. Alright, that just about sums up the main part of collision detection. We are finally done collision detection for a while now. Again, there are many ways to do collision detection in general and to do this in general. But this is the way that I chose to do it for this tutorial series. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions whatsoever, leave them down below in the comments. I will, or someone else will hopefully answer your question or help you out. Thank you so much everyone for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.